Well, hello and welcome to See the Stories. It is, as always, in our final hour, time for our signature segment, the signature segment of the 3-hour news show. Now, this time we'll talk about world of racing. With international racer of Indonesian descent, we have Gael Julien.
That's right. So Gael Julien is a racer who started his career in karting in Indonesia, where he won second place in the Rock Cup Indonesia Championship. He then moved to the European circuit to pursue a career as an F4 racer. Gael has also raced in the Spanish F4 Championship, where he finished 11th out of 50 participants and achieved 2 podiums. Wow. He has been competing in the Le Mans prototype or LMP3 class of the European Le Mans series since last year.
Now, yes, Le Mans is exactly that one circuit that in a different class, I think it goes up to 24 hours of racing. So can you imagine? This guy races more than an hour.
I heard that he drove for 4 hours.
Oh,
we will make sure of that.
Yeah, so we're going to confirm. We have him here in the studio, Gael Julien himself. Hi and welcome.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Hello, Gael. So
It's a pleasure.
How many hours did you drive?
So the races are 4 hours long, and I usually do a double stint, so 2 hours.
2 hours, goodness.
Yeah, so it's done in a team, right? Your particular. Can you tell us more about the Le Mans series? This is a very special series, and what makes Le Mans so special?
So the 24 Hours of Le Mans is the biggest race in the world, and the European Le Mans series aims to prepare young drivers like me for the main race, which is the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So we have 6 4-hour races during the season, and young drivers get the opportunity to perform and get scouted potentially to then move on to the bigger steps.
And you made podium.
Yeah, so I recently won the 4 Hours of Le Castellet in France. So yeah, home win for me.
Right.
And the team was really happy with it.
I'm going to ask you about basic questions later on about LMP and maybe F3 to F1, right? What's the difference between those two? But, you know, honestly speaking, he is very young. If I'm not mistaken, you're 18 years of age.
Yes, correct.
18 years
18 years of age. When I was your age, I was playing marble. And you're playing with racing car.
Wow.
Right, so when did you start and what made you interested into racing?
Yeah, so I started karting at a young age. I was 9 years old when I started here in Sentul, Indonesia.
9 years old?
Yes. I did discover karting actually a bit earlier than that, at 7. But I only started competitively racing at 9, 10 years old. So I went on to participate in national championships and international championships. I became a 2-time Asia champion in karting. I won in Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand. And yeah, I mean, karting is the beginning for any racing driver. And I really enjoyed my time in karting before moving on to what I'm now doing.
I mean, who inspired you to be a racer? Is your father a racer as well? Or was he?
No, funnily enough, nobody in my family has any racing experience, so I'm the first one. But yeah, I mean, I've always liked cars in general, and motorsports was always my biggest dream, so I'm really happy to be here today.
Right.
So, you know, how did your experience in, starting off at the Rock Cup here in Indonesia prepare you to get to where you are now?
I guess racing go-karts is just the same as racing any other massive race like the 24 Hours of Le Mans or Formula 1, just on a smaller scale. So young kids get to learn all the racing basics, overtaking, defending, and just having fun, you know. So it's really important for young kids to start in karting, and I think it massively helps me with my racing experience today.
How did it feel at 18 years old? You went back to Sentul recently to be racing on that circuit that you went to and where you started.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the place. Sentul brings back so many good memories of my childhood. And to see the same people who started with me back in the day, just to see them again and experience the feeling I had back then, was really special.
Now the boy has soared high at international stage. Anyway, you are an F4 racer, right, as you mentioned earlier, who is now racing in LMP3, right? So can you elaborate the differences between go-kart, F4, F1, and LMP3, LMP1, for those of them who are not familiar. I'm not familiar about that. There are too many terms to understand,
Yeah.
right? What are the differences?
Of course. So racing is split into many different categories, and karting being the first echelon, if you would, of that. So young kids would debut in karting and spend up to a couple of years until they're teenagers, and then you have to choose your path in racing cars. So for the most part, you know Formula One, which is the holy grail of motorsports, let's say. But you've got different routes as well, like rallying or endurance racing,
Yep.
which is the path that I chose to follow. And in endurance racing itself, LMP1 or hypercars, as they're now known, is the main category, but it also goes down to LMP2 or Le Mans Prototype 2, LMP3 and LMP4.
Why Le Mans? Why not F1, F2, F3?
I think I've always been a big team player, and that's also a key point in endurance racing. Not being so selfish and thinking about the team, because sometimes you have to take big decisions, not for yourself, but for the whole team. And I like that aspect of racing, sharing the car and the race with people I like. So, yeah.
So in terms of technical differences, right? So the LMP3 and so Le Mans is strictly just in Le Mans, right? Because other categories they go on tour, but you race specifically for your category 6 times a year in Le Mans.
So I'm currently competing in the European Le Mans series, so it's a European championship.
Yeah.
It's not limited to Le Mans. We've got 6 different racetracks across Europe this year. There's also the Asian Le Mans series and the IMSA series in America, which used to be known as the American Le Mans series. So Le Mans is not just limited to Le Mans, but it's a global series. You've got regional series and also the World Endurance Championship, which takes place all over the world, like Formula One.
Yeah.
And that is the main place where endurance racing cars travel to.
I'd like to read about Le Mans from the news article that I read earlier. Unlike fixed distance races whose winner is determined by minimum time, the 24 hours of Le Mans is won by the car that covers the greatest distance in 24 hours.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes, so in Le Mans, compared to other racing categories where maybe you'd measure by laps, Le Mans is measured by time. So the goal in Le Mans is to do the most laps possible without stopping and doing the least pit stops and all of this stuff.
Right.
So the winner is, as you said, determined by the person who covers the most distance.
So within 2 hours, how many laps did you make?
So the whole race is around 100 to 150 laps. And to split that in 2, I do about half of that.
I was even complaining, driving for Mudik, right? An hour in a toll road, I was complaining.
Well, I think the one thing that he gets to enjoy is no traffic jam.
No,
Le Mans would be
difference
horrible with
is,
traffic
when
jam.
I was 9 years old, I played marble, that's why I'm complaining. And he played with his toys, cars. That's why he won the race.
So-
It's funny enough you say that with traffic, because endurance racing, actually traffic plays a big part in racing. Because compared to Formula One or other series where it's only one style of cars, endurance racing actually is mixed. So you've got different cars on track, slower and faster cars. So traffic is a thing, and you have to manage it during the race.
So,
wow.
according to you, I mean, it's common for us to know more about technically what it takes to become, let's say, an F1 racer, because it's different. And you mentioned endurance racing. What does it take, or what is there different preparations in regards to, because endurance racing? You got to have the endurance to finish later 24 hours, now 4.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the main difference compared to sprint races is the time, the length. So you have to be physically fit and mentally also prepared to endure such long races. And the fact that we're racing at such high speeds for a very long time, it means that we have to stay focused because the risk of accident is always very high. So yeah, you have to prepare for it. It's not easy to stay focused after a long time driving, and especially in the night races as well, something that endurance racing does. Obviously in 24 hours you've got the night period as well. So yeah, driving at night at high speed when you're tired is quite difficult sometimes.
Wow.
So for your categories, usually what time of the day?
Usually our races start at around 12, so midday, and it lasts 4 hours, but it can happen that we also have night races sometimes.
Wow, I mean, you are very young and you are so determined in pursuing your career and achieve, the highest possible. What are the challenges that you've been facing so far, the biggest one?
I think the main challenge for me during my career was moving to France, because although I'm French, I was born in Indonesia, and I moved to France alone, aged 14, to pursue my dream of being a racing driver. So yeah, it was tough, you know, being away from my family and friends.
You moved alone?
Yes, yeah.
At the age of 14?
Yes.
How did you adapt at the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have that much time to think about it because I was so focused on my job, on my dream. So yeah, for me it was all about focusing and having fun. So I didn't really feel any pressure or sadness at some times. So yeah.
I wanted to ask something. You know, there are athletes, young athletes, who make it professional at a very young age. How does one balance education and career?
I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of teachers that support me at my former school and my university now. So it's much easier for me to manage between both of them. But yeah, obviously you need to have the support system backing you up when you're not there and to get the work done when you're here again and all the exams and that. But yeah, I'm lucky enough.
What do you study in university now?
I'm studying tourism.
Tourism, that's
tourism.
interesting.
Yeah.
Right,
Very
you know,
interesting.
the challenge that you mentioned was the challenge that you faced when you first moved to France. But the current challenge, I mean, can you guide us through the competition of LMP3 at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, racing is super competitive as in any sport, but the fact that you're also sharing the car with other people for such long periods of time, it can sometimes make things complicated. So it's not just about who's the quickest, but who's the more determined person. And you have to keep at it for long periods of time and go to the end. That's the most important bit.
How young are, you know, the competitors in your category?
So we've got a wide age range in LMP3. It's one of the categories in endurance racing where there's amateur drivers or bronze drivers. So they can be also like gentleman drivers, businessmen who are a bit older than me.
I still can join then. I'm not
Yes.
too old
If
to
you'd
join,
like,
right?
if you'd like.
No, I can't join. I would complain.
Well, 4 hours.
For hours, goodness.
Okay. And so it's very wide.
Yeah, usually it's around 20, I'd say, for the youngest on the grid. I was the youngest last year at 17. But yeah, I mean, age is not really an issue in racing. It's more about how you drive. So.
Yeah.
What's the end goal for you?
For me, obviously, as an endurance racing driver, the end goal is the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And yeah, it may seem like it's very far away, but with enough hard work and wins, it can happen. So yeah.
You can do it, Gael.
Yeah, totally. Well, Gael is still going to stay here with us in the studio, by the way. We're going to continue our conversation after a short break, so make sure you stay tuned to see the stories.